Okay, here we go. You guys, I get to do this in front of all you guys once a year, so you can't mess up. That's the problem. And so I will just tell you this. The first service was just a little quiet. They were like, I don't know, they didn't get their shots of espresso, or if they went to breakfast and they just ate too much food, but they were quiet. So it's hard for someone to speak anyway in front of a crowd that's quiet, but when you get to speak once a year and people are quiet, you think, it's like you don't want to come back out here. So I'm going to need you to help me out because it just helps. One day maybe you'll do this and you'll wish somebody would have clapped or cheered or hooted and hollered for you. Okay, there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I feel that the Christians are in this service. I don't know about that first group. Don't tell them I said that. Okay. If you come to Copper Point often, some of you, I know that you're visiting today and you're in from out of town or you're visiting with your family, but you know that in March, Galen and I hosted about 80 people from our church on a trip to Israel. And it was my first time to ever go. And I always heard people say how amazing and life-changing it was. And I assumed it would be that way, but I don't know why I never really was like totally excited about going. I was excited because I had a lot of friends from church going, and that made it, exciting and fun. But I was like, it'll be good. I was not expecting what would happen for me in that amazing land of the Bible. And there were so many days that were just life-changing. But I think it was day 2, because it's really hard for me to remember what happened which day. I think it was day 2 that we actually we were staying on the Sea of Galilee in a hotel, and we wandered, or we didn't wander, they took us. We weren't like wandering in the desert. They took us in a bus with Wi-Fi down to this town, this ancient city called Magdala. And so we were in an ancient city called Magdala. It's a really cool city. And even recently, they've uncovered a lot of ruins, and most recently, a first century synagogue has been uncovered. So it was just awesome to hear the history about it, and how they knew it was a first century synagogue, and how they know this and how they did that. And I started by taking a lot of notes, and then just my hand was worn out. And we looked at the Sea of Galilee, and then we did wander into a chapel, a little Catholic chapel there at Magdala. And in that chapel, there was this amazing replica of a boat at the altar area. And I actually researched, and that boat was there. It was to commemorate when Jesus actually got in the boat and came off the shore of Galilee to preach, because so many people were following him. He had to get in the boat and get into the Sea of Galilee to preach, so that he could be heard, and he could minister to the crowds, to the thousands of people. We were in that chapel and sitting there, and one of our Israeli female tour guides just decided, she did a little teaching, and so they would just share some pertinent information. She was a really special woman. Her name is Adi, and she was just great at everything that she taught us. And I just thought she was going to tell us some interesting facts about that boat. I didn't know. I'm sitting at the front on this bench, and like all the 80 people were behind me for some reason. I'm staring. I have an unobstructed view of just her. And she began to talk about some of the women in the Bible. And she focused on Mary Magdalene. And because the special part about this Magdala, about the city of Magdala, is that is the birthplace of Mary Magdalene. And she started to focus in on her. And she started talking about her and the life that she led before Christ, before she met Jesus, and what she did after she met Jesus. And she's just, standing there, and her voice, just hearing her speak, and you're talking, a female Israeli in a country, in a culture where things have been so volatile, and maybe women haven't always been at the highest place in the society, especially in the first century. And she's sharing about this amazing woman, Mary Magdalene. She shared that it was captivating to hear her speak. And in that moment, I realized what Jesus did. We think we're so cool in 2019. We think that this generation is the generation that's liberating women and setting women up on a pedestal and making us something of who we are. That is so untrue. Jesus did that over 2,000 years ago. He turned the tide. He flipped the tables on this women are second-class thing. Because in that century, in that time, women were considered second-class citizens, and he treated them exactly the same. And he liberated, and he put women in places of honor so that people would know that that's how he felt about them. And that day, sitting there, understanding, 40 years ago when we started doing ministry at Albuquerque, there weren't many women on staff of churches. I don't know that one church had a woman on staff in this city. And I joined our staff at the church, and there was just only woman worship leader I had ever heard of was Darlene Check in Sydney, Australia with Hillsong. I mean, it was just a different time. And I was sitting there in Israel, in Magdala that day thinking, Jesus, all these things we put on ourselves, these chains we have on us, these stigmas we have attached to us, these are things we've done to ourselves. Things that other people may have done to us, but this is not how it was meant to be, because Jesus set all that right. 2,000 years ago, he said it right. We did this. Society did this to us. That's not what Christianity does. It's not what Jesus does. Jesus sets us free. That day, tears pouring down my face, I decided I wanted to speak today to you about an awesome woman in the Bible and how her life was radically changed by one encounter with Jesus, and that's Mary Magdalene. We're in the third week of a series called Flip the Script, and this is so fitting because this woman whose life was tormented and dark was totally changed when she met Jesus. What's interesting, as I started researching for her, I thought, okay, I'll preach on Mary Magdalene. There is nothing. I'm thinking, I need a famous person who's preached a sermon that can tell me something, because what I learned in Sunday school, I think they told me wrong. I'm for sure of it, because there's some of the things I thought. You might have thought it. I thought she was a former prostitute. How did I grow up thinking that? But I did. Do you think that too? That's what I did too. So she's most well known for false reports about her. So that whole prostitute thing, that happened in the 6th century by the Pope. He put that on her and said she was a former prostitute. And then in 1969, they realized that wasn't right, and they took that. There's even in the Catholic Church, she's a saint now. So all that stigma was gone, but a person put that on her. So that's not true. She was often identified as a former prostitute. I said that. Some identify her with the sinful woman that got the special ointment and washed Jesus' feet and then used her hair to dry it. Well, there's no biblical proof for that. That wasn't her. Others have confused her with Mary of Bethany, who was Lazarus and Martha's sister. That's not her. And because I say we can't prove that, I'm not a biblical scholar. But I read a lot of that the last month and a half, and it can't be proven. That is not this Mary. She was born and raised in Magdala, and that is Mary Magdalene. And we don't know much about her, but what we do know, the only personal facts about her we know are found in Luke chapter 8, verse 1 through 3. So I'm going to read that to you real quick. It'll be on the screens. This is when Jesus first began his ministry tour. That's where this came into play. He continued according to plan, traveled to town after town, village after village, preaching God's kingdom, spreading the message. The 12 were with him. There were also some women in their company who had been healed of various evil afflictions and illnesses. Mary, the one called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, Joanna, wife of Chusa, Herod's manager, and Susanna, along with many others who used their considerable means to provide for the company. So that's it. That's her history. That's all that's in the Bible about her past. So what we know is she was afflicted with many illnesses and sicknesses, and Jesus cast 7 demons out of her. So what do we know? What was her life like before she met Jesus? Well, I did some research. I don't watch demon movies, and I don't watch demon TV shows. I mean, the whole demon thing, I stay clear. But I did some research in the last few weeks, and there are some commonalities with people biblically that were demon-possessed and in modern day, currently, demon possession. And if you research it, you would find these things. So remember, she's been delivered from 7 demons. We don't know how long she was possessed or how long she was sick with illnesses, but we do know Jesus delivered her. So here's some things about demon-possessed people. One thing we know is they live a very dark life. We know she was tormented. She had they have continuing conditions like violence. Demon-possessed people can become extremely violent or like superpower strength too. Also, mentally unstable. And another thing about demon-possessed people is they were habitually naked. So, you'll know now if you're not demon-possessed, if you're not naked all the time. There you go. That'd be the last check mark. You can be relieved. So think of her life, tormented, ostracized, put to the side. I can picture her just sick, illnesses, just angry, and no clothes, dirty. You know that she had no friends. She couldn't possibly, no friends, ostracized, outcast. Some probably called her a lunatic because of the instability of her mental condition. All that's the life she had. No one, dark. You know, if you have seen a demon possession or demon movie where there's demons involved, you know it's a dark place. It's a dark place. You're possessed by the devil. That's a big deal. You know, she had a rough life. I love this. And those 3 verses we read, just 3 verses. Heck, she was demon-possessed by 7 demons. She was really sick and had a lot of things wrong. Jesus gave her back her life, her credibility, and began to write a brand new script. Isn't that awesome? Just in one thing. So that's great. There are some commentaries that even refer to her as a female apostle. There are some. But all scholars agreed that she was the leader of that pack of women that went with Jesus and started following him. You might have heard me say, that pack of women, the group of women, her name was always mentioned first. She was referred to 12 times in the Bible, in the New Testament. Her name was, she was with a group, her name was listed first. So scholars concur that she was the leader of that group of women, the leader of the women that financed Jesus' entire ministry, went everywhere he went, helped to take care of that group. What a place. Think of this. She was esteemed. She was lifted in high regard. That doesn't sound like a woman who just right before had been demon-possessed, naked in a corner, tormented, dark, mental illness, everything that was going on with her, these rages that were happening. And because of that encounter with Jesus, he put her in a place of high esteem. She definitely didn't have the stigma of someone who had a sordid past because of where Jesus put her. He didn't care. There's 3 lessons, 3 awesome lessons we can learn from the life of Mary Magdalene, and I'm going to share those with you this morning. Number 1, and this is a biggie, and if you've been in this sermon series with us for the last 3 weeks, you've heard this more often than not. You do not have to be defined by your past. Many people, and Mary, we're focusing on her today, suffered. Mary suffered. She was a suffering person, tormented. Before she met Jesus, her life was full of torment. But none of that mattered. None of that mattered to Jesus. He chose her and esteemed her. Listen to this. I love this. She was present at so many important things. If you stop, I think that's what hit me so big that day when I was sitting in that chapel is actually what did Jesus do? I mean, yes, he delivered her, and that's enough to celebrate about. But look what he did for her once that was done. Not just did he celebrate her, he chose her. He put her in a place to be regarded. So many firsts for her. She financed his ministry. Think of this. Not only was a miracle done for her, the casting out of 7 demons and healed of her diseases and afflictions, but she got to witness the miracles. She saw him heal the sick. She saw him give sight to the blind. She got to have a front row seat to hear him to be able to give life back to people, to deaf ears, to be able to give sound back to deaf ears. She was there. She saw him help the lame to walk. She saw him heal those of diseases. She saw him raise Lazarus from the tomb. She saw him cast out other people with demons. Think of what she did. Front row seat to the amazing miracles of Jesus and a front row seat to his teachings. She was there. She got to hear him teach the Sermon on the Mount. She got to hear him teach to thousands of people. She got to be there when he wrote, when those important words were written for our Bible. She heard them with her own ears. That's what she got to do. She was present at the crucifixion. She was present at the burial. She was the first one to the empty tomb, the first one to actually see Jesus alive, and the first one to tell others that Jesus was alive. She wasn't sort of delivered. He gave her like the number 1 spot. That's what Jesus did for her life. He esteemed her. And that's the point I want to get across today. Your past, you do not have to be defined by your past. Jesus doesn't just save you and you become a Christian to get eternal life. He turns it around. He turns it around, not just defined by your past, but he sets you to a new place. Obviously, her past was not an issue for Jesus. Her past was not a big deal for him. It didn't matter to him what she had done. He still used her at the highest level that anyone could ever be used. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, and the new has begun." That's an awesome verse. It's hard to believe. I think this is so hard to believe. And I stopped to think about it. So you're telling me that, and I'm telling you this, that was rhetorical. You're telling me that a person can live that kind of sordid life? You can have this awful past. You can have a not so awful past. But you're saying like one prayer, that you say, Jesus, I'm asking you in my life to be Lord. I declare you as Lord of all. I ask you to forgive my sins, to cleanse me from unrighteousness, and I want to follow you. You're telling me that 10-second prayer can change everything, that can change my past, and I can have a new life? It seems like it shouldn't work that way. It seems like I should have to do a lot of things to say sorry. You know, when your kids are bad, and if they're not bad yet, they're little, they will be. And if they're bad and they disobey, you want them to say more than sorry. Jonathan, my middle one, used to say sorry. I'm like, sorry does not work anymore. I'm going to need you to get on the floor. I mean, you need to clean the kitchen 20 times. I mean, sorry just doesn't seem like enough, right? Sometimes sorry, I want to see you feel really guilty. But that's not how Jesus does it. He says, sorry is good enough. Sorry is good enough. Jesus, forgive me. I repent. That's good enough, because then he takes our hand and walks with us the rest of the way. He doesn't do guilt and shame. So it is just that simple. Jesus never disqualifies us because of our past. It sounds so good, doesn't it? Sounds too good to be true. It is true. Jesus never disqualifies us because of our past. Number 2, think of this, lessons from Mary Magdalene. Number 2, Jesus should be the center of your world. Well, how does that happen? Listen to this. After Mary's first encounter with Jesus, he became the son that her whole world revolved around. Whatever she had in Magdalene, she must have had money because she financed the ministry. She left it. She walked away. She left it to follow him. He became the center of her entire world. Everything she did revolved around Jesus. Her time, her money. She was totally devoted to him. Mark 12:30 says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, your life, and with all your mind, thought, and understanding, and with all your strength. That's the mandate to me, to love the Lord my God with all my heart, my mind, my soul. Does my life look like that? Does my life look like a person who loves the Lord with all my heart, mind, and soul? What is at the center of your world? What's at the center of my world? What is number 1? I've heard my entire Christian life, that Jesus needs to be number 1. Jesus is first place. You've got to put Jesus first. You've got to put him first in your life. Well, it sounds like it would be a one-time decision, okay? Jesus, you're first. And that would be it. But that's not the way it works. You and I both know, if you're a Christian, that it's an everyday thing. You know, in Luke 9, it says, deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. It's an everyday thing. You become a Christian. You don't have to ask Jesus to forgive you every day. You are a Christian when you ask Jesus into your heart. But to put him number 1 and to make him Lord of your life requires something we do every single day. There's no way to get around the fact that verse means that everything in our life has to become second to Jesus. Everything in our life becomes second to him. Putting him first is the easiest thing and the hardest thing that we'll ever do, because everything in our life is clamoring for our attention. Our family, our jobs, our life, children, our hobbies, just busyness, everything, it begs for our attention. So it's hard to say every day, Jesus, you're first. But it's daily, it's intentional. It's something we do all the time. I found that discipline usually comes first. Have you found in your life, if it's something that's not a habit for you, something you don't love to do, that it's hard to have the desire at first? So for me, it's like exercise. Like some of you guys love it. You love to run, and you just like feel good to exercise all the time. I don't have that feel good feeling. This doesn't happen for me. Like I don't finish exercising and think, I just feel refreshed. I'm thinking that was dumb. Because you know why it's dumb? Because we have to do it every day. Like I want to do it one time and go, okay, I tried. Or I want to eat healthy once. I mean, kale. How many days can you eat that? Kale, K-A-L-E, kale. How many days? I know what you thought I said. I didn't say that. How many days in a row do you have to eat kale to be healthy? And so, because discipline comes first. If I want the desire, if I want to see the results, I have to be disciplined first. So that's go to the gym often, exercise often, eat healthy often. And then eventually, the benefit of doing that discipline will become something I desire. I may not desire the hard work, but I desire the result of what that discipline gave me. That's the thing with putting Jesus first. It's not always that I just jump up in the morning and say, I'm just going to do good today. I mean, y'all know this. You've got kids, little ones. They do. I don't know. Mine didn't. They don't wake up and go, oh, today I just want to serve you, Mom. They still don't. I just want to serve you, Mom. I just want to do everything right. I'm going to obey. I'm never going to say no. The word no will not come out of my mouth. I'm just going to love and serve. I'm going to do things before you ask. I'm going to just honor you. Is that anybody in here? If that's happened, you need to be teaching our next class on parenting, because that is not our human nature. Our human nature is to fight what makes us better. Our human nature is to not have discipline. We want to just say no, and we want to, we don't want to do the right things. We want to do the easy thing. Serving God, becoming a Christian, piece of cake. Serving Him and Him being Lord of our life, that's a daily commitment. It's a discipline that we do every single day. And Mary Magdalene, every day she followed Jesus. Not some of the time, not for 1 week. She followed Him every day and devoted everything she had. Because of her life, it can teach us things like disciplines like giving, serving, praying, obeying. Those don't come natural. It's not natural for us to think, I think I'll just give my extra money I just got to the church. I mean, who wakes up and says that? It's not the natural thing, but you learn it. It comes. That desire to give financially comes from being disciplined. The desire to serve. You see these people out here serving you every weekend? It's not like they don't want to, giving up their Mother's Day or their Easter or their Sunday. That's not the most natural thing that happens, but it comes from discipline. Praying, people that pray, intercessors, it comes with discipline. And obeying comes because of all those. It becomes easier to obey when you're disciplined. We need to be following Mary's example. We shouldn't simply return to the life we left when we have an encounter with Jesus. Let me just tell you this. When you have an encounter with Jesus, and I know we could debate this, but I'm going to say it anyway. When you truly have an encounter with Jesus, I mean, you're there. You don't want to go back to the life you had. Do you think Mary Magdalene wanted to go back to, y'all take the 7 demons and the naked half the time and all the other stuff? She didn't want to go back. When you have a face-to-face, you have an encounter with the holy, living God, you will not walk back to the life you had. Satan may tell you have to, but you don't have to walk back to that life. You will not turn to the life you left. You want to move on. Is it difficult? It can be. But your desire is to follow Him. Jesus changes everything. Jesus, you know why you need an encounter every day? Because I just said if you truly have a Jesus encounter, you won't go. If you're going through a lot right now, you feel stale, you feel flat in your life, you feel like spiritually you don't feel anything, you probably need a Jesus encounter. And maybe you need one every day. That's why we get in the Word every day. We pray every day, because sometimes our lives are just to the place, they're difficult. And a lot of people in here are going through things that are bigger than I can even imagine. So having a God encounter, a Jesus encounter every single day will keep you from wanting to go back to the life you left when you encountered Him the first time. That is the way it works, because He does change everything. Our whole life revolves around serving Him, becomes intertwined with His call and His life till you can't distinguish them. My life from Jesus, because I'm following Him at such a place. That's good. That's good right there. That's good. Number three, Jesus uses the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He uses the weak things of the world to shame the strong. In the Apostle Paul's first letter to the church of Corinth, to the Corinthians, he talks about the gospel being foolishness. The world doesn't understand it. People, if that are not Christians, don't understand. They discount and dismiss that people like Mary Magdalene or somebody like us, somebody that doesn't look like they would be great as a Christian or working at a church or whatever. People discount them. But according to the Apostle Paul, God did that on purpose. God on purpose decided He would use the weak things to confound the wise. The weak things to mess up our whole way of thinking, because we think it should be done this way and God should use This kind of person, and he uses the opposite. 1 Corinthians 1:27 through 29 says, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." And we see that perfect example with Mary Magdalene. God chose Mary Magdalene because it didn't make sense. He chose her because it didn't make sense. Think of that. That wasn't just an accident that he chose Mary to be the first one to the empty tomb and the first one to see him, Jesus, after he resurrected. I mean, I know it would be easy to think, he chose a woman because she's always up earlier. Or he chose a woman because he knew that she would be there doing the spice thing, getting everything prepared for burial. He chose her to go tell everybody first because women tell everybody first. But that is not why God chose her. I am convinced that God was intentional about choosing Mary Magdalene because he knew where she was going to come from, and he wanted to make a point, not just to her, but everyone around, that I will use who I choose to use, and the past doesn't matter. Her life before doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm going to use someone that people would say, I don't know about that. You could have used one of these disciples who did so much better, but he chose to use Mary Magdalene. What a statement. What a statement. The most critical event in history. And God chose to use this woman, Mary Magdalene, the most critical thing. We got to be careful not to dismiss things like that. Like I mentioned, it's just saying, it was just kind of a coincidence. It's intentional. God doesn't do things by chance. It's intentional. We can't dismiss when God doesn't do things that follow our expectations. Jesus doesn't always do what we expect. And when I wrote that, I wrote in parentheses beside it, I'm not sure in my almost 58 years of living and 38 years in ministry that God has ever done anything the way I expected. Not just some things, anything. Like, I am convinced that I have some good plans. And never one time does he use it. I mean, I have a good thing. I can see it. I'm great, too. I'm a planner. I'm a fixer. I can probably organize your whole life. But he did not allow me. He doesn't do it that way. God does what he wants, and he does it. I think sometimes when I pray it, God, I want you to do this and this, I think he does it exactly opposite just to remind me, I've got this, Kay Woodward. You aren't in control. I'm in control, and I'm going to choose to do this the way I want to do it. And that's what God did with Mary Magdalene. That's what he did with her. I love that. I love what he did in her life, that he was able to use her in the most epic way when he died on the cross and he rose again. That's amazing. He delights in that. The entire trajectory of her life, the entire trajectory of Mary Magdalene's life changed with one encounter with Jesus. She was going that way, and she encountered Jesus, and her life turned that way. One encounter. He set her free. He broke the chains. He did an absolute miracle in her life. He changed the script. He flipped it around completely. And in closing today, I just want to share one more quick story with you about a life change, a script that was flipped. Another person that had a complete turnaround. You see, 40 years ago, no one who knew me would have chosen me to be standing here today. I was smart as a teenager, high school girl, very smart. Graduated second in my class. I was outgoing. I had tons of friends. But I lived one life at church, and I lived a whole other script at school. I was two different people. I was so rebellious. I was a total rebel. I put on one show for one group and another show for the others. I was running from God and my calling. I often wonder how much easier it would have been had I just stopped running when I was 15 and 16 instead of those years of running and the hurt that it caused people around me, my family, the devastation it brought to me, had I just followed God from the beginning. You see, I was torn between two worlds. I was torn between two worlds. I didn't think I wanted the world my parents had. godly and at church all the time, and they looked like they had no fun. I mean, I was a kid. What did I know? They looked like they had no fun. I mean, my mom would let me wear a bikini. Isn't that horrible? And now I won't wear a bikini. But I thought they were so outdated and so weird. I didn't want that life. I was torn between two worlds. Satan was trying so hard to make sure that my life followed the script that he had written for me. He worked overtime to see that I followed that path and that script written for me. But God, Jesus fought harder. God fought harder. He fought for my life. He put people in my path that wouldn't let me go. I had the gentle and not so gentle nudging of the Holy Spirit. I had parents who God allowed to catch me in most of my deceit. And I wonder, how in the world did they know that? How did that happen? But God was like, I'm fighting harder, Kay. Satan's got this plan, but I've got this script for you. I've got this chapter written for your life. You see, because that was at 15, 16, 17, 18. I had an encounter at 17 and a half years old. One of those times they made me go to church, because they always made me go. I never wanted to go, and I never got to skip. We went Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I mean, we went all the time. And it was in one of those times I was made to be there that I had a God encounter, a real wow. Like I knew when that happened, at that moment for me, that I would never go back. I knew that was the difference maker, that there would be no more old life for me. It would be only a new life. I knew that day that everything was different. 17 and a half. Imagine where I was headed on that road. At 18 years old, I met Galen. How quickly that could have changed. How quickly that could have been so different. Where I could have been in another whole world right now. And God was fighting and desperately to save my life, to get me ready for this. The sons that are in ministry, the husband of almost 40 years, the ministry here, Satan had no intention of me standing here today or any day. This was not in the plan. He wanted to destroy my life. Let me tell you, don't be fooled. Satan has one thing for you. That is to kill, steal, and destroy, to ruin your life. That is all he has for you, is ruin. But Jesus had life for me, and I'm so grateful that I had that God encounter and things would not change.